Chapter 1. The Empty Vessel. The roar of the crowd felt like physical blows against Arya's skin. Thousands of shifters packed the grand hall of the Solar Pack, and their collective scent was a suffocating mix of roasted meat, heavy wine, and judgment. She stood on the raised dais beside the Alpha King and kept her chin lifted high. It was the only armor she had left. Her silk dress was a beautiful shade of crimson, but it felt like a cage, a gilded trap designed to display her failure to the world. King Alaric stepped forward. The gold goblet in his hand sloshed as he gestured to the masses. He was drunk on power and wine. His voice boomed like thunder and silenced the room instantly. "Another year," Alaric shouted. He looked back at her with a sneer that twisted his handsome face into something ugly. "Another pup ceremony, and yet my queen stands here alone." Laughter rippled through the hall. It was a cruel sound, sharp, biting. Arya dug her fingernails into her palms until the skin broke. She did not flinch. She could not flinch because weakness was a death sentence in this court. "An empty vessel," Alaric spat the words. He turned his back on her to address his warriors. "A garden that bears no fruit is a waste of good soil." The jeering grew louder. Heat flooded Arya's cheeks. Shame burned in her chest like acid. But beneath the shame lived a secret that terrified her more than the king's mockery. A flutter, a tiny, impossible movement deep within her womb. She was not empty. She was carrying life. She kept her hands strictly at her sides. If she touched her stomach, if she showed even a hint of protection, Alaric would know. His wolf senses were dull from liquor, but his paranoia was sharp. A pregnant queen who had not shared her husband's bed in months would not be celebrated. She would be executed. Arya scanned the crowd. She looked for a friendly face but found only scorn. They hated her because the king hated her. Mob mentality ruled the pack. She took a slow breath. The air smelled of roasting boar and deception. "Tonight we celebrate the pups of the pack." Alaric raised his cup. "May their mothers be fertile and strong, unlike some." He cast one last look at her. It was devoid of love. It was the look a man gave a broken tool before throwing it away. Arya held his gaze. She had to survive this night for the life growing inside her, for the secret that could burn this kingdom to the ground. The baby moved again, a tiny kick against her ribs. Fear turned to steel in her spine. She would endure the laughter. She would endure the humiliation, because she was a mother now, and mothers did not break. Chapter 2. The Silver Vial. The door to her chambers clicked shut and the noise of the feast vanished. Silence rushed in. It was heavy and thick. Arya leaned against the oak wood and exhaled a breath she had been holding for hours. Her legs trembled. The corset felt like it was crushing her ribs, so she clawed at the laces. She needed air. She needed to think. "Let me help you, my queen." Arya jumped. Alara stepped out from the shadows of the vanity. Her lady-in-waiting moved with the quiet grace of a cat. Alara held a small glass vial in her hand. The liquid inside was dark and murky. It smelled of bitter roots and suppressed magic. "You are tense," Alara said softly. Her voice was like honey poured over gravel. "The king was cruel tonight. You need to rest." "I am fine," Arya lied. She moved toward the window. The moon was rising. It looked huge and yellow against the black sky. "I just need sleep." "You need your medicine," Alara insisted. She uncorked the vial. The sharp scent filled the room. "To keep your nerves calm, to keep your wolf settled." Arya stared at the bottle. She had taken the tincture every night for 3 years. Alara said it was for anxiety. But lately, Arya felt strange after drinking it. Numb, disconnected. Yet she reached for it. She had to. The tincture masked her scent. It hid the changes in her hormones. If she stopped taking it, the guards outside her door would smell the pregnancy within an hour. "Thank you, Alara," Arya whispered. She took the glass. She drank it quickly. The taste was foul. It burned her throat like liquid fire. She handed the empty vial back and waited for the familiar numbness. But tonight was different. A flash of heat surged through her veins. It wasn't the burn of the alcohol base. It was something ancient, something wild. For a split second, the candles in the room didn't just flicker. They flared silver. A bright, blinding metallic light that turned the room into a negative photograph. Arya gasped and grabbed the back of a chair. My queen, Alara's voice was sharp, sudden, suspicious. The silver faded as quickly as it came. The room was orange and dim again. Arya blinked. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. What was that? It felt like lightning trapped under her skin. I am dizzy, Arya stammered. She sat down heavily. Alara watched her. Her eyes were dark and unreadable. She didn't look concerned. She looked calculating, like a scientist watching a rat in a maze. Sleep will help, Alara said. She pocketed the vial. Sleep washes away all sins. Alara bowed and left. The lock clicked. Arya stared at her hands. Her skin looked normal. But she could still feel the echo of that power, a hum in her blood. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if responding to the silver light. Arya shivered. The medicine was supposed to suppress her wolf, so why did she feel like something was waking up? Chapter 3, The Midnight Decision. Midnight struck the castle tower. The bell tolled 12 times. Each ring sounded like a funeral march. Arya was not asleep. She was packing. The nursery rhyme Alara had hummed earlier stuck in her head. It was a warning disguised as a lullaby. A scratch at the window made her freeze. It was a specific rhythm. 3 taps, 1 scratch. Arya rushed to the latch and threw it open. Cold night air blasted in. A figure crouched on the ledge. It was Kale, her personal guard, the only wolf in the solar pack who hadn't sold his soul to Alaric. His face was pale under the hood of his cloak. My queen, Kale whispered. He didn't enter. He stayed perched on the stone like a gargoyle. You must leave now. What is it? Arya asked. Her hands flew to her throat. Has he? The king signed the papers an hour ago, Kale said. His words were rushed. Panic laced his scent. The annulment is official. He claims you are defective. He has ordered the healers to perform a full examination at dawn. The room spun. A full examination. They would strip her. They would use magic to scan her womb. They would find the pup. And then they would kill them both. Alaric would never let a rival heir live, especially one he didn't sire. Dawn, Arya breathed. That is only 5 hours away. The king is gathering the council, Kale continued. He wants a public execution to cleanse the bloodline. You cannot be here when the sun rises. Fear tried to paralyze her. It wanted her to curl into a ball and weep. But the baby shifted, a solid weight, a promise. Fear turned into fuel. Where can I go? Arya asked. His sentries patrol the main roads. The southern woods, Kale pointed into the darkness. The border is weak there, the river is shallow. That is Crescent Moon territory, Arya hissed. Alpha Ronan's land. He kills trespassers on sight. He is a monster. He is an enemy of the king, Kale countered. And enemies of my enemy might be salvation. It is the only chance you have. Stay here and die, or run and pray. Arya looked at her room, her silks, her jewels, her cage. She grabbed a rough wool cloak from her chest and threw it over her nightgown. She didn't pack a bag. Bags slowed you down. She shoved a small dagger into her boot. Go, Kale urged. I will distract the patrol on the west wall. You have 10 minutes before the shift change. Thank you, Kale, Arya said. Her voice broke. Why are you doing this? Because no one deserves to be hunted in their own home, Kale said. He dropped from the ledge and vanished into the night. Arya climbed onto the stone sill. The wind whipped her hair. The ground was far below. The forest beyond was a black ocean of trees and predators. She took a breath. It tasted of rain and freedom. She jumped. She landed in the soft earth of the flower bed and didn't look back. She ran toward the darkness, toward the enemy, toward the only future she had left. Chapter 4, The Hollow Earth. Mud slicked the stone floor of the escape tunnel. It smelled of rot and old secrets. Arya did not care. She ran until her lungs burned like swallowed charcoal. Every step sent a jolt of pain up her shins. Her silk slippers were shredded. Her feet bled. But pain was a distraction from the terror nipping at her heels. A sound vibrated through the damp walls. A horn, deep, guttural. It was not a warning. It was the Alpha's hunting call. Alaric knew. He wasn't waiting for dawn. He had unleashed the trackers. Arya stumbled into the open air of the forest. The night was a wall of black trees and biting wind. She didn't stop. She couldn't stop because stopping meant death. The baby inside her tumbled in distress. A wave of nausea hit her hard. "Find her," Alaric's voice roared from the castle battlements. It echoed off the valley walls like a curse. "Bring me her head." Fear was a cold hand squeezing her heart. She pushed through the dense undergrowth. Thorns tore at her cloak. Branches whipped her face. She was a queen an hour ago. Now she was prey. She had to reach the river. The water would mask her scent. Kale said the border was weak there, but the forest felt alive. Shadows stretched into claws. The wind whispered betrayals. A howl ripped through the night. Close, too close. The trackers had picked up her trail. Arya forced her legs to move faster. Her body felt heavy, sluggish. The withdrawal from Alara's tincture was setting in. Her vision blurred at the edges, not from tears, from something else. A strange pressure built behind her eyes, like a headache made of light. She ignored it. She focused on the sound of rushing water ahead. The river, salvation, or a watery grave. Chapter 5. The Bleeding Line. The river was a jagged scar of black water cutting through the land. Mist hovered over the surface. It looked like ghosts rising from the depths. Arya stood on the bank. Her chest heaved. Her breath came in ragged gasps that tasted of iron. Across the water lay the crescent moon territory. The trees there were taller, ancient. They loomed like silent sentinels guarding a forbidden kingdom. To cross was treason. To cross was suicide. To stay was murder. She stepped into the water. The cold was a shock that stole her breath. The current tugged at her skirts. It tried to drag her down. She fought it. She fought the river because the river didn't know she was fighting for two. Halfway across, the sensation hit her. It wasn't physical. It was energetic, a static charge that raised the hair on her arms. The pack warred. She was crossing the magical barrier of a rival alpha. It felt like walking through a wall of static electricity. A sharp pain lanced through her temple. The silver light flared in her vision again, brighter this time. It blinded her for a second. She missed her footing. The current swept her legs out from under her. She went under. Water filled her nose. Darkness swallowed her. She thrashed. She kicked. Her hand clawed at the riverbed. She dragged herself up the opposite bank. She was coughing, freezing, broken. She crawled onto the mossy earth of the crescent moonland. Her strength evaporated. The adrenaline crashed. Her body simply gave up. She curled into a ball in the mud. The forest here smelled different. Pine, ozone, and danger. Pure, unadulterated danger. Her eyes drifted shut. The last thing she heard was the snap of a heavy twig. Someone was here. Someone big. Chapter 6. The Beast's Shadow. Consciousness returned in slow waves. Pain radiated from her ankle. Cold seeped into her bones. Arya opened her eyes. The world was blurry, but the figure standing over her was sharp, defined, terrifying. He was massive, a wall of muscle wrapped in dark leather and fur. He blocked out the moon. His presence sucked the air from the clearing. Alpha Ronin, the butcher of the south. He didn't move. He stood perfectly still, like a predator deciding where to bite first. His eyes were not human. They were glowing gold. Wolf eyes, they bored into her, assessing, judging. Arya tried to scramble back. Her limbs refused to obey. She was paralyzed by exhaustion and fear. "Please," she rasped. Her voice was a broken shard of glass. Ronan stepped closer. A low sound vibrated in his chest. A growl. It wasn't aggressive. It was confused. He tilted his head. He inhaled deeply. He was scenting her. The air between them changed. It grew thick, electric, charged. The scent hit her then. Not blood, not death, rain, deep earth, and something sweet like burnt sugar. It was intoxicating. It pulled at her navel. It sang to the wolf she had suppressed for years. Ronan froze. His golden eyes widened. The ruthless mask slipped. For a heartbeat, he looked shattered. "You," he whispered. The word was a prayer and a curse. He reached for her. His hand was large enough to crush her skull. Arya flinched. She expected a blow. Instead, his fingers brushed her cheek. gentle, reverent. The contact sparked a violent reaction. A blinding pulse of silver light erupted from Arya's skin. It threw Ronan back a step. He stared at his hand, then at her. "Mate," he breathed. The word hung in the cold night air. A verdict, a promise, a catastrophe. Chapter 7. The Wolf in the Room. Warmth. That was the first thing Arya registered. Not the suffocating heat of the palace hearths, but a living, radiating warmth. She was buried under heavy furs that smelled of cedar and wild rain. She blinked. The ceiling was rough-hewn timber, not gold leaf. She sat up. A sharp ache throbbed in her ankle, but it was bandaged with clean linen. "You scream in your sleep." The voice came from the corner, deep, resonant. It vibrated in the floorboards. Ronan sat in a leather chair, sharpening a jagged blade. He wasn't wearing a shirt. His chest was a landscape of scars and muscle, a map of violence that terrified and fascinated her. He didn't look up from the knife. "Where am I?" Arya asked. She pulled the furs higher, a futile shield. "My private quarters," Ronan said. The steel rasped against the whetstone. "SHHHK. SHHHK. The only place in this pack where my warriors won't tear your throat out for sport." He finally looked at her. The intensity of his gold gaze hit her like a physical blow. There was no mockery there, only a hunger that made her breath hitch. He knew. He had to know she was his mate, but he stayed seated, a chained beast. "Why?" she whispered. "We are enemies." "Politically, yes," Ronan stood. He moved with silent, predatory grace. He stopped at the foot of the bed. "Biologically, that is a different war." The door banged open. A lean, wiry wolf strode in. Kai, Ronan's beta. His face was a mask of cold fury. "The border patrol found 3 more trackers," Kai spat. He glared at Arya. "She is a beacon, Alpha, a death sentence. We should kill her before Alaric burns our forest down." "Get out, Kai," Ronan growled. "She is a spy." "I said get out." The command slammed into the room. Kai flinched, bowed stiffly, and left. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken threats. Arya touched her stomach beneath the furs. She wasn't just a beacon. She was a bomb. Chapter 8. The Bitter Test. The crescent moon stronghold was carved directly into the mountain. It was rough, pragmatic, and brutally efficient. Arya walked the perimeter of the courtyard, shadowed by 2 silent guards. The air was thin and cold. It cleared her head but did nothing to settle the nausea rolling in her gut. Wolf pups tumbled in the dirt nearby. Their laughter was a sharp knife in her heart. Her own pup was a secret she was smuggling through enemy lines. "Drink." Ronan appeared beside her. He held out a clay cup. Steam rose from it, smelling of willow bark and raw magic. "What is it?" Arya hesitated. "A healer's brew, to purge the exhaustion from your blood," Ronan said. His eyes tracked her every micro-movement. "Unless you have a reason to refuse." It was a test. If she refused, she looked suspicious. If she accepted, the potent herbs might react with the suppressed celestial energy coiling inside her. "I trust you," she lied. She took the cup. Her hands shook. She downed the liquid in one gulp. It tasted like earth and fire. It hit her stomach and exploded. Heat rushed to her skin. Not a fever. Power. The dormant wolf inside her, the one Alara had drugged into a coma, stirred. It roared. A sensation of pure light flooded her veins. Her vision fractured into white sparks. "Arya," Ronan's voice sounded far away. She clamped a hand over her eyes. "Don't show it. Don't let it out." "Just strong medicine," she gasped. She forced the power down, wrestling it into the dark corners of her soul. When she lowered her hand, her vision was clear, but Ronan was staring at her fingertips. Smoke was rising from the clay cup where she had touched it. Faint silver scorch marks marred the pottery. "You run hot for a solar wolf," Ronan murmured. His suspicion sharpened into a blade. Chapter 9. The Shadow's Blade. Night fell like a hammer. The wind howled through the valley, masking the sound of footsteps on the roof. Arya lay awake in Ronan's bed. He slept on the floor near the door, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. It was the only thing anchoring her to sanity. A latch clicked. It wasn't the door, it was the skylight. A shadow dropped from the rafters, silent, liquid darkness. A glimmer of steel caught the moonlight. "Ronan!" Arya screamed. The shadow lunged. Ronan moved faster than thought. He didn't stand. He launched himself from a prone position, tackling the intruder in midair. They crashed into the heavy oak wardrobe. Wood splintered. A vase shattered. The room erupted into violence. Snarls, the wet thud of fists hitting flesh. The assassin was fast, clad in the black leathers of the king's elite guard. He spun, slashing a dagger across Ronan's bicep. Blood, hot and copper-scented, sprayed the air. Ronan didn't even grunt. He caught the assassin's wrist. There was a sickening crack of bone. The assassin shrieked. Ronan drove a knee into the man's chest, pinning him to the floorboards. "Who sent you?" Ronan roared. His face was a feral mask, teeth elongated, eyes glowing molten gold. "The king sends his regards," the assassin choked out. He bit down on something in his mouth. Poison. His body convulsed once, then went limp. Silence rushed back in, louder than the noise. Ronan stood, chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm. He turned to Arya. The violence was still rolling off him in waves. He looked terrifying. He looked magnificent. He stepped over the body and crowded Arya against the headboard. His bloody hand braced against the wall by her head. "He knows you are here," Ronan rasped. "There is no neutral ground anymore." "I am sorry," she wept. "Don't be sorry," Ronan's gaze dropped to her lips. The adrenaline was shifting into something else, something dangerous. "Be ready." Chapter 10. The Raven's Scroll. A dead raven lay on the balcony. Its neck was snapped, a cylinder of black parchment tied to its leg. Arya untied it with trembling fingers. The seal was Alara's, a wax rose with a thorn through the center. "He comes for you, an army of 5,000. Leave, or the crescent moon burns." The words turned Arya's blood to ice. She couldn't let Ronan's pack die for her sins. She grabbed her cloak, moving on pure instinct. She made it to the heavy oak door before a hand slammed it shut. Ronan loomed over her. He smelled of rain and fury. "Going somewhere," he growled. "Read it," she shoved the parchment at his chest. "Alaric is bringing a war, Ronan. I am a curse. Let me leave." "You think I fear him?" Ronan crumpled the note in his fist. "Let him come. I will pave the road to hell with his soldiers." "You will die," Arya screamed. She shoved him. It was like shoving a mountain. "I won't let you die for me." "It is not your choice," Ronan roared back. He invaded her space, backing her against the door. "You are my mate, you stay." "I am a ruin," she sobbed. "I am broken." "You are everything," he breathed. The distance between them evaporated. He crashed his mouth onto hers. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision of desperate souls. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was oxygen. His hands tangled in her hair, possessive and rough. Arya melted. The fear dissolved into white-hot need. For a moment, there was no war, only him. Chapter 11. The Star Within. The kiss ended, but the world didn't stop spinning. Arya pulled back, gasping, her lips swollen and bruised. She opened her mouth to speak, but a sharp, blinding pain ripped through her abdomen. It wasn't a cramp. It was a supernova. She cried out, clutching her stomach. Her knees buckled. Ronan caught her before she hit the floor, swinging her up into his arms effortlessly. "Healer," he bellowed. The command shook the stone walls. Minutes later, Arya lay on the furs, sweat soaking her hairline. The pack healer, a blind elder named Orin, hovered his hands over her womb. His milky eyes widened. "Ancestors preserve us," Orin whispered. "What is it?" Ronan demanded. He held Arya's hand so tight his knuckles were white. "Is she dying?" "No, Alpha," Orin's voice trembled. "She is creating." The healer murmured an incantation. A soft glow illuminated Arya's stomach, but it wasn't the warm amber of a wolf pup. It was a swirling, chaotic mix of gold and piercing silver. The light pulsed, illuminating the bones of two tiny forms. Ronan froze. He saw the gold, his bloodline, and he saw the silver, something ancient, something that shouldn't exist. Twins, Orin breathed. One of earth, one of the sky. Ronan looked at Arya. The betrayal of her secret was gone, replaced by a terrifying awe. She wasn't barren. She was carrying a prophecy. From the shadows of the hallway, Kai watched. He saw the silver glow reflecting in the Alpha's eyes. He didn't step forward to help. He stepped back, slipping into the darkness to find a courier. Chapter 12. The Declaration of Blood. The war drums started at sunset, a rhythmic, thumping heartbeat echoing from the valley floor. The Alpha King's vanguard had arrived. Ronan stood on the high rock overlooking the crescent moon gathering. The wind whipped his hair. He looked like a god of war carved from granite. The pack below was restless, sensing the encroaching army. They murmured about the stranger, the refugee queen who had brought this doom. Ronan raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. "The king demands we surrender the woman," Ronan's voice carried over the crowd, amplified by his alpha authority. "He claims she is a fugitive, a thief." He paused. He looked back toward the window where Arya stood watching. "He lies," Ronan roared. "She is not a fugitive, she is Luna." The words struck the crowd like lightning. Gasps rippled through the warriors. To claim a mate was one thing. To crown her Luna in the face of war was a suicide pact. "We do not yield what is ours," Ronan drew his sword. The steel sang. "Let them come. Tonight we feast on royal blood." The pack erupted. Howls tore through the night, a chorus of defiance. Up in the tower, Arya leaned against the cold glass. The vibration of the howls traveled through the stone and into her bones. She hadn't taken Alara's tincture in days. The fog in her mind was gone. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. Her eyes were no longer just brown. A ring of mercury silver was bleeding into the iris. The drug had worn off. The dormant beast was awake, and she was hungry. Chapter 13. The Serpent in the Grass. War preparations vibrated through the stone floor of the keep. The air smelled of sharpening oil and fierce sweat. Arya stood in the strategy room, but her mind was elsewhere. A strange, silvery hum buzzed at the base of her skull. It was not a headache. It was a warning. The celestial wolf was no longer scratching at the door. She was knocking it down. That silver hum pulled Arya toward the eastern hallway. She followed the sensation because her instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The shadows seemed to twist and point toward the armory. She found Kai there. The beta was not sharpening blades. He was stuffing a leather satchel with scrolls detailing the pack's perimeter defenses. A lantern flickered on the table, illuminating his treacherous hands. "You are selling us," Arya said. Her voice was cold. It did not shake. Kai spun around. The guilt on his face morphed instantly into a sneer. He did not deny it. He looked at her stomach with disgust. "I am saving my pack," Kai hissed. He took a step toward the back exit. "Ronan is blinded by lust. He would sacrifice us all for a barren queen and a monster pup. I made a deal to spare the crescent moon." "You made a deal with a butcher," Arya countered. She felt a surge of heat in her palms. "He will kill you all anyway." Kai laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Better a servant to a king than a corpse for a witch," he spat. He threw the heavy lantern at her. Arya ducked. The glass shattered against the wall and oil burst into flames. By the time the fire roared to life, the back door was swinging in the wind. The serpent had fled, and he had taken their secrets with him. Chapter 14. The Vow of Bone and Blood. Ronan stood by the burning hearth in his chambers. He was fully armored in black leather and chainmail, but his posture was slumped. The news of Kai's betrayal had hit him harder than any sword. Kai was his brother in arms, his right hand. Now that hand had cut him deep. Arya stepped through the smoke. She saw the devastation in the set of his shoulders. She walked to him and placed her hand on the cold steel of his chest plate. "He chose his path," Arya whispered. "Now we choose ours." Ronan looked down at her. His gold eyes were dim. "I cannot protect you," he admitted. The confession sounded like gravel in his throat. "With the defense plans gone, Alaric knows every weak point. We are fighting blind." "Then we fight blind," Arya said fiercely. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I did not run from a palace to die in a tower. I am fighting for this child. I am fighting for you, because you are the only man who saw me when I was invisible." Ronan's resolve hardened. The gold fire returned to his gaze. He pulled her against his armor. The cold metal pressed into her soft skin, a stark contrast of war and peace. "If we die tonight," Ronan vowed, pressing his forehead against hers, "I will find you in the next life. I will hunt you down across every star and claim you again." "Make me a promise," Arya demanded. "Make them bleed for it." "I will drown the world in their blood," Ronan swore. He kissed her then. It tasted of salt and finality. It was a seal on a death warrant. It was the most beautiful thing Arya had ever felt. Chapter 15. The storm breaks. The sun did not rise. It was choked out by smoke. The Alpha King's army was a black ocean spilling over the horizon. 5,000 soldiers marched in perfect unison. The ground shook with their rhythmic tread. Arya stood on the battlements beside Ronan. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Her eyes scanned the enemy formation. She knew this formation. She had seen Alaric draw it on napkins at dinner. "They will feint left," Arya shouted over the wind. "The main force looks like it is heading for the main gate, but it is a trick." Ronan looked at her. "How do you know?" he asked. "Because Alaric is arrogant," Arya said. Her voice rang with authority. "He thinks brute force solves everything. He will send the heavy infantry to the gate to make noise. But his elites, the shadow stalkers, will hit the western ridge. That is where Kai told them the wall is thinnest." Ronan did not hesitate. He did not question her. He turned to his captains. "Move the archers to the western ridge," Ronan bellowed. "Double the guard, ignore the gate charge." The captains paused. To ignore the main gate seemed like madness. But they saw the way their alpha looked at the queen. They saw the strange, silver light beginning to pulse in her eyes. "Move," Ronan roared. The order scrambled the troops. Minutes later, the first wave hit. Just as Arya predicted, the main gate assault was noisy but slow. But on the western ridge, shadows detached themselves from the trees. The king's elite killers. They ran straight into a wall of crescent moon arrows. Screams tore through the morning air. The first blood was spilled. Arya watched the carnage. She did not look away. She was done hiding. The queen had gone to war. Chapter 16. The Veins of the Mountain. Despite the initial victory on the ridge, the air in the courtyard shifted from triumph to sudden, electric dread. The ground beneath their feet groaned like a dying beast. Arya felt the vibration travel up her legs before the explosion tore through the cobblestones. She realized too late that Kai had sold them twice. He had exposed the western wall, but he had also mapped the ancient aqueducts running directly under the keep. Stone erupted into shrapnel. A geyser of fire and King's soldiers burst from the earth in the center of the stronghold. Chaos swallowed the order of the defense. "Protect the Luna," Ronan roared. He threw himself into the fray. His sword was a blur of steel that painted the air red. Arya scrambled back as a behemoth of a soldier lunged at her. He raised a war hammer that smelled of dried blood. Before the blow could crush her, a black shadow intercepted it. Ronan took the impact on his shoulder. The sound of cracking armor echoed louder than the screams of the dying. He grunted, but did not fall because falling meant her death. He drove his blade into the attacker's throat and ripped it free. "Go," Ronan gasped. Blood poured from his pauldron. "Get to the sanctuary." "I will not leave you," Arya cried out. She grabbed his good arm. "You must," he snarled. He shoved her toward the keep doors. "Because if they take you, this world ends." Another explosion rocked the foundation. The eastern wall collapsed. Through the dust and smoke, the Alpha King strode in. He walked over the bodies of the fallen with casual indifference. He did not look at Ronan. He looked only at Arya, and in his hand he held a chain made of dampening iron. Chapter 17. The Weaver of Lies. In the center of the carnage, a figure stood untouched by the violence. Elara walked through the blood-soaked mud in pristine robes. She did not flinch at the severed limbs or the burning banners. She looked like a ghost haunting a graveyard. She stopped 10 paces from where Arya stood frozen. "You look surprised," Alara said, her voice cut through the clash of steel. "Did you think I was merely a servant?" Arya stared at the woman who had brushed her hair for years, the woman who had fed her soup and secrets. "You drugged me," Arya accused. Her hands shielded her stomach. "You poisoned my child." "I saved the kingdom," Alara corrected. She pulled a vial from her sash. "I gave you the tincture because your blood is volatile. Do you know why the king fears you?" Arya shook her head. The battle raged around them, a blur of motion, but this circle of conversation felt suspended in time. "Because the celestial line did not die out," Alara stepped closer. Her eyes were devoid of warmth. "It went dormant. Alaric knew that if a female of the line ever woke, his reign of terror would crumble. I kept you asleep, Arya. I kept the monster in the cage." "I am not a monster," Arya whispered. The silver ring in her eyes flared. "You are worse," Alara sneered. "You are a god in a mortal skin, and gods destroy everything they touch." She raised her hand. Green magic crackled at her fingertips. She did not intend to capture. She intended to sterilize the threat permanently. Arya tried to summon her own power, but the shock of the betrayal acted like a heavy blanket over her soul. She was paralyzed by the face of the only mother figure she had ever known. Chapter 18. The Eclipse of Hope. As the smoke cleared, the full scope of the disaster revealed itself. The Crescent Moon warriors were dead or in chains. The keep was a smoking ruin. Arya lay in the dust. Alara's magical strike had missed her heart but clipped her shoulder, draining her strength. She could only watch as 4 soldiers dragged Ronan to the center of the courtyard. He was beaten, bloody, but he was still fighting. He thrashed against the iron chains that burned his skin. The Alpha King stepped on Ronan's chest. The sound of ribs giving way made Arya retch. "Look at him," Alaric commanded. He pointed his sword at Arya. "Look at the mongrel you chose over a king." Ronan turned his head. His left eye was swollen shut. His gold gaze met hers. There was no fear in him, only an apology. "I love you," Ronan mouthed. No sound came out. "Take him to the capital," Alaric ordered. "Mount his head on the spikes for the wedding gift." The soldiers hauled Ronan up. They dragged him toward the prisoner wagons. He dug his boots into the mud, leaving deep furrows, trying to stay within her sight for one more second. Then he was gone, swallowed by the enemy ranks. Arya was alone, truly alone. The king loomed over her. He grabbed a handful of her hair and yanked her head back. "You are coming home, Arya," Alaric whispered. His breath smelled of stale wine. "And we are going to cut that abomination out of you piece by piece." He threw her into the dirt. Darkness clawed at the edges of her vision. Despair was a heavy stone on her chest. She closed her eyes. It was over. But deep in the black, in the silence of her womb, a tiny silver spark ignited. It was not hope. It was rage. Chapter 19. The Silver Storm. The prisoner wagon rattled over the broken cobblestones. It smelled of rust and dried despair. Arya sat in the dark. Her wrists were bound in dampening iron, but the metal felt cold and dead against her skin. It was no longer working. The spark in her womb had become a bonfire. Alara sat across from her. The traitor held a small knife and watched Arya with a smug, serpentine smile. "Do not look so grim," Alara taunted. She twirled the blade. "The king has a special cell prepared. You will serve the pack as a broodmare until he decides you are spent." Arya looked up. The darkness in the wagon shattered. Her eyes did not just glow. They burned. A beam of pure, concentrated starlight cut through the gloom. Alara froze. The knife slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. "What are you?" Alara gasped. She scrambled back against the bars. "I am the storm you tried to bottle," Arya said. Her voice was not her own. It was a chorus of ancestors. It vibrated with the force of a landslide. Arya flexed her wrists. The iron cuffs did not unlock. They disintegrated. They turned to gray dust that drifted to the floor. She stood up. The wagon shook violently as her aura expanded. The wood groaned and splintered outward. "Stop!" Alara shrieked. She raised her hands to cast a spell. Arya simply looked at her. A pulse of silver energy erupted from her chest. It slammed into Alara like a physical hammer. The traitor was thrown through the back of the wagon. She hit the ground and did not move. Arya stepped out of the wreckage. The surrounding guards leveled their spears, but their hands shook. They looked at the woman glowing with the light of a dead star. They dropped their weapons and ran. Chapter 20. The Sovereign's Call. Rain began to fall. It sizzled against Arya's skin, but she did not feel the cold. She felt only the tether, the soul bond pulling her toward Ronan. He was alive, faint, suffering, but alive. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. She did not scream. She projected. To me. The command rippled through the forest. It was not a plea. It was a royal decree woven into the fabric of the night. From the shadows of the tree line, wolves emerged. They were the remnants of the crescent moon, bloody, broken, limping, but when they looked at her, their spines straightened. They saw the silver halo crowning her head. They saw the prophecy made flesh. A young warrior stepped forward. He had lost an ear and his armor was shredded. He dropped to one knee in the mud. "Command us, Luna," he rasped. "No," Arya said. She lifted him with a gesture of her hand. "Do not kneel, we march. Tonight we do not fight for a pack, we fight for the world." She turned toward the king's main encampment. The fires of his victory feast burned on the horizon. They thought the war was over. They thought they had won. Arya raised her hand. The air around her distorted. The rain stopped falling on her skin and instead orbited her like a shield. "Leave no one standing who holds a sword against us," Arya ordered. She began to walk. She did not run. She moved with the inevitable momentum of a glacier. Behind her, the broken wolves howled. It was a sound of renewed, terrifying hope. They followed the light. They followed the queen who had risen from the ashes of her own execution. Chapter 21. The Path of Judgment. The perimeter of the Alpha King's camp was a fortress of spikes and fire. Guards stood laughing by the gate and passing skins of wine. They were celebrating the death of the crescent moon. Then they saw her. Arya walked out of the darkness. She was alone at the front. The silver light radiating from her skin turned the night into noon. The guards sobered instantly. They leveled their crossbows. "Halt!" the captain shouted, his voice cracked with terror. "Fire!" Bolts flew. Dozens of steel tips whistled through the air. Arya did not flinch. She did not dodge. She simply exhaled. A wave of force exploded from her body. The bolts hit the invisible wall and vaporized. They turned to ash mid-flight. The guards screamed as the shockwave hit them. The heavy wooden gates were ripped from their hinges. Splinters the size of spears flew into the camp. Tents collapsed. Fires were snuffed out. Arya stepped over the ruin of the gate. Inside, the camp was chaos. Soldiers scrambled for weapons. But when they looked at her, they dropped them. It was primal fear, the instinct of a prey animal recognizing an apex predator. She walked a straight line through the camp. Soldiers parted like water. No one dared to touch her. The ground beneath her bare feet left scorched silver footprints in the mud. Ahead, the king's command tent stood on a rise. The flap was open. Alaric stood there. He was holding a goblet. Beside him, tied to a post and bleeding from a dozen wounds, slumped Ronan. Arya stopped. The air pressure dropped. Lightning crackled in the clear sky above. "Alaric," she called. The name struck the earth like a meteor. "Your reign ends now." Chapter 22. The Judgment of Stars. Alaric laughed. It was a wet, jagged sound that scraped against the tension in the air. He pressed his sword deeper into the skin of Ronan's neck. A thin line of crimson ran down the Alpha's throat. "A light show," Alaric spat. "You think pretty lights make you a queen. You are nothing but a breeder who forgot her place." Arya did not scream. She did not beg. She simply ceased to be human. The silver light that had been orbiting her collapsed inward and then exploded outward in a blinding supernova. The shockwave flattened the command tent. Canvas and timber disintegrated into dust. Alaric stumbled back. He shielded his eyes. When he looked again, terror finally cracked his mask. Arya was floating inches off the ground. Her hair was a halo of white fire. She raised one hand and the king's sword flew from his grip. It twisted in the air like a piece of molten toffee and fell uselessly to the mud. "You speak of breeding," Arya's voice echoed. It sounded like 1,000 bells tolling at once. "You speak of bloodlines. Now you will see what a true lineage looks like." She clenched her fist. Alaric gasped. He clawed at his chest. Invisible bands of force wrapped around him. They lifted him into the air. He kicked and thrashed, but he was a puppet in a hurricane. "For every mother you silenced," Arya declared. "For every mate you stole." She swiped her hand downward. Alaric slammed into the earth with the force of a falling meteor. The ground cracked. A crater formed where the king had stood. There was no scream, only the sickening crunch of bone and the final silence of a tyrant unmade. Alaric lay broken in the mud. He was not dead yet, but he was no longer a king. He was just meat. Chapter 23. The New Dawn. The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed against the eardrums of every soldier on the hill. The king's army looked from the broken body of their leader to the woman glowing with celestial fire. They did not attack. They dropped their swords. Clatter after clatter rang out like rain on steel. 5,000 men fell to their knees in the mud. Arya ignored them. The light faded from her skin, leaving her exhausted and mortal once more. She ran to the post where Ronan slumped. Her hands worked frantically at the ropes. "Ronan," she gasped. "Ronan, look at me." The ropes fell away. He tumbled forward into her arms. He was heavy. He smelled of dried blood and pain, but his chest rose and fell. His one good eye cracked open. A weak, bloody smile touched his lips. "You put on quite a show," he rasped. "I told you I would come for you," Arya wept. She pressed her forehead to his. "I told you I would burn it down." "You did," Ronan whispered. He reached up and wiped a smudge of ash from her cheek. "My queen, my savior." Arya tried to pull him up, but a sudden, ripping pain tore through her abdomen. It was sharper than any blade. She cried out and doubled over. Water gushed down her legs, soaking the hem of her ruined dress. Ronan's eyes widened. The warrior vanished and the father emerged. He roared for a medic. His voice cracked with panic. "The pups," Arya groaned. She clutched his armor. "They are coming now." The blood moon hung low in the sky. It was fat and red. A cosmic signal. The prophecy was not waiting for peace. It demanded to be born in the ashes of war. Chapter 24. The Legacy of Two Worlds. The Alpha's command tent had been destroyed, so they laid her on a bed of furs under the open sky. The battlefield became a nursery. Rough warriors turned their backs to form a wall of privacy. Ronan knelt behind her. He became her anchor. His hands gripped hers, and he took every ounce of her pain into himself through their bond. "Breathe, Arya," Ronan coached. "You are stronger than this." "I can't," she screamed. The pain was a living thing. It was tearing her apart. "You can," Ronan kissed her sweat-soaked temple. "You defeated an army. You can do this." With one final, earth-shattering push, the first cry pierced the night. It was a strong, guttural wail. The midwife lifted the first pup. He was covered in blood, but his skin glowed with a warm, golden hue, a true alpha heir. "A boy," Ronan choked out. Tears cut tracks through the blood on his face. But the labor was not over. The second contraction hit instantly. Arya arched her back. The silver energy she had used to kill the king surged one last time. It flooded her womb. The second baby slid into the world in silence. She did not cry. She hummed. The midwife gasped. The second child was pale as moonlight. Her eyes opened immediately. They were not the blue of a newborn. They were spinning galaxies of silver. "A girl," Arya breathed. She collapsed back against Ronan's chest. Ronan placed the twins in her arms. One of earth, one of stars. The blood moon above seemed to bow to them. The soldiers watching from a distance lowered their heads. They understood. The War of Swords was over. The reign of the Celestial Queen and her hybrid dynasty had just begun. Arya looked at Ronan. He looked at her. In the midst of death, they had created perfection. "We won," Ronan whispered. "No," Arya smiled, looking at her children. "We just started."